joining us in this special day. Well, I wonder if you all have a fan to help you cope with this piece of evidence on global warming. And this is an important day at COP. We've got colleagues in the march right now. Some here went there, ran to meet us. Some are running a bit late. I personally wanted to be there, but I opened this exception for this important discussion. So, my name is Raiza Pina, and I am the Communications and Engagement Coordinator at CCCA. I'll be moderating this panel. For those who don't know, CCCA is a nonprofit organization that works combining the power of law and data science to find ways in which local experience can address transnational legal action. And it's a pleasure to me for being moderating the panel. Let me introduce this amazing set of panelists. I have next to me Glenn Horowitz, CEO at Mighty Earth. Thanks, Glenn, for being here. Glenn will need to leave a little bit earlier because he has a flight to catch, but luckily we'll hold him for 45 minutes, and then João Gonçalves will take the seat. Then we have Alexandre Mansour from Radar Verde and director of O Mundo que Queremos. Then Nusha Urbancic from Changing Markets, CEO at Changing Markets. And then Jorge Tembé. Thanks for joining us, Jorge. He's a legal advisor at Federation of Indigenous People of Pará, FEPIPA. Before we start the conversation, let me explain how our event will unfold, just to balance your expectations. We expect to have 1 hour duration in which I will pose specific questions to the panelists. They will have up to 5 minutes to respond. If you could speak even in 3 minutes, that would be amazing. But yeah, I'm giving you 5 minutes. And then I will pose a second question. In the second round of questions, I will pose a question that you all will respond to. We will finalize the panel, opening up to a Q&A session. If you got any questions, any comments, you are very welcome to raise your hand and participate. I think we will have time for maybe 2 comments. And starting with our subject today, the meat industry is actively seeking to maintain a business-as-usual approach in the face of environmental and climate destruction. Here in Brazil, meat giants' reign of deforestation, land grabbing, and destruction of nature in its supply chains is masked by greenwashing, including here at COP, where we find a strong lobbying working here at COP. Deforestation and land conversion for cattle in Brazil increased by 60% from 2016 to 2020. The scientific consensus is clear. Animal agriculture is a key driver of climate change and deforestation. And the best solution is reduction of production and consumption of animal products. In face of this, the powerful meat lobby is doubling down on its message that more meat is good at COP30. Big Meat is working overtime to create meat-friendly messaging and undermine the science to keep consumption above healthy standards. Ultimately, it is the planet, farmers, and all of us, really, who pay the price. That said, this session will examine what is happening in the field and the impact of beef production on indigenous communities who have been fighting against land grabs and human rights abuses for decades. We will also draw out examples of meat industry narratives highlighting disinformation, greenwashing, and agricultural exceptionalism. So I will start with Glenn, who need to leave earlier. Glenn, Mighty Earth have been working for a long time to combat some of the issues related to agribusiness climate impacts. Can you tell us a little bit about your latest research and what it shows about big meat business as usual?
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And we have a powerhouse audience here as well, so thank you guys all for coming. I know it's a diverse audience. We have a lot of, in addition to NGOs and advocates, practitioners. I think we even have a couple people from the meat industry, which is very welcome because I think at the climate summits, it's often, NGOs speak in some rooms and business speaks in another and government in another. So welcome your participation so we can make progress. I think that for me, in one sense, the meat industry is business as usual in a lot of ways. In another sense, there are tantalizing opportunities and progress towards significant change. So we have continued to see extremely high levels of deforestation driven largely by the meat industry. I mean, it's 90% plus of deforestation in South America is caused by cattle and animal feed. And that, even as, for instance, in Southeast Asia, where palm oil and paper and rubber used to be huge drivers of deforestation, that's come down 90% as companies have adopted and implemented commitments with NGO monitoring. We have not seen that kind of breakthrough from the meat industry. And I think it's largely due to poor leadership from the major meat companies that have not had the will or even interest in driving change here. And we even see some of the great successes within the meat industry of the past, like the soy moratorium, which bans deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon and has protected about 17,000 square kilometers of forest, according to great research from the University of Wisconsin, come under attack, even though it has been a win-win that has allowed deforestation for soy to come down dramatically and 6 million acres of expansion on degraded land. So even that, parts of the meat industry are really attacking. And I think, and that's really painful to see. And we monitor deforestation from the sky and on the ground and work with our indigenous partners to see it. And it's still going on. On the other hand, I do want to recognize some of the momentum that we need to build on. So we had a big campaign focused on Carrefour, the biggest Brazilian supermarket chain, and they've taken action. They drove more than down. That's better? Okay. Thank you for. Tell me if there's anything else. Drove large meat companies to cut off more than 1,000. Yeah, I think for people sitting in the next row, it's good. Tell me. Good? Okay. Up to 1,000 suppliers for engaging in deforestation and land grabbing. That sends a powerful signal on the ground that if you destroy forests or other ecosystems, you'll lose market access. We need to spread that because that's that's not happening as much in ecosystems like the Cerrado, which are even more endangered than the Amazon, Pantanal, outside of Brazil, Gran Chaco, Chiquitania in Bolivia. We need broader action so that we can break the link between agriculture and deforestation. There are 1.6 billion acres of degraded land in South America when you can expand agriculture without deforestation. In some ways, we have now also commitments to deforestation conversion-free production that are supposed to be being implemented now from the entire soy industry and parts of the cattle industry. This should start to pay off in results. We need to improve traceability. Government Pará has started to require that and deploy that. We see progress in Colombia towards requiring traceability. We need much more accelerated implementation and investment. There are other areas where we're still seeing business as usual. Despite the progress on deforestation that we're starting to see, the meat industry produces enormous amounts of methane. I think Nusha and others may address that, so I'm not going to dive deep into that. But this is an industry that produces more climate pollution than all the cars, trucks, ships, and planes in the world combined. I often say electric vehicles are a big deal and a good thing, but the meat industry for the climate is way bigger than electric vehicles and deserves commensurate focus. And it's not getting the funding that it needs to drive the transformation. Finally, I'd love to talk about the meat industry's role in this as we go forward. You know, we ultimately, if you want to tackle the climate impact, and it's, you know, free up land that's currently occupied by the meat industry, which in many cases is like 75% of arable land, you need to shift away from industrial meat to animal-free protein. And one of the most diabolical things I think the meat industry has done, or parts of the meat industry, is they have been very successful at persuading even pretty progressive, health-oriented people that this amazing plant-based protein or other kinds of animal-free protein somehow are part of big industry, even though it's like 1% of what actual industrial meat is. And, you know, from our perspective, animal-free protein has less than 10% of the environmental impact of industrial meat. And so we need big companies to start investing in and adopting it and building it. Because that way, because it takes up so much less land, we can free up land for rewilding, suck gigatons of carbon out of the atmosphere. And to do that, we're going to need to tackle some of the misinformation that's out there that's often successful coming from the meat industry. So those are the, you know, I think where we stand right now. Some progress on deforestation that I hope we can continue and accelerate, and much more need for, you know, a political fight in many ways, communications fight on some of these other big issues.
Amazing, Glenn. Thank you so very much. I will pass now to Alexandre. Alexandre, director at O Mundo que Queremos and also member of the Radar Verde. I would like to know if you have documented, you have documented meat companies' lack of action on deforestation mainly. And what more you can tell us about this and how little progress do you see? Could you share it with us? I had the opportunity to hear Rita, your colleague from Radar Verde, and I think the figures are just impressive. If you could tell a little bit more about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking. I hope you can see here because I had a presentation as well. Well, you may know that beef in Brazil is responsible for more than 0.5% of Brazilian emissions. It's more than all other sources together, even agriculture. And 2/3 of these are caused by deforestation alone. And beef production is responsible for almost all deforestation in the Amazon. And it does not need to be like that. Do you have the presentation? Okay. Yeah. It doesn't need to be like that. We can't produce, you know, beef enough to meet all the demand without cutting any forest. And there's a lot of pressure for this change. The companies have made commitments. Brazilian governors have made commitments. The Brazilian government have made commitments to take deforestation out of the supply chain. And we have pressure from the buyers. China wants deforestation-free meat and so on. What does we need to do that transition? We need to know where we are. That's why we started doing the ranking of the supply chain. From 5 years, since we began 5 years ago to publish each year the situation of the meat industry. What we do, we analyze each year, and this is the last result. We analyze each year all the meat packers that have plants in the Amazon. This year we have mapped 151 companies, and this is the rank of the best ones. We have all the results at our website, and the best ones are those, they are famous, of course, and you can see that the 12 best ones, they have control of the last farm in the supply chain, but they don't have control of the other farms. Cattle spend 90% of its life in several farms. Some farmers are completely illegal, some farms are legal, some farms have legal deforestation, some are not. And the last one was where it's the cattle spent 3 months. Companies have control of that last farm, but they don't have control of the other parts of the supply chain. We also map the supermarket chains. We map the 100 largest supermarket chains in Brazil, and only 3 of them have any control of the last farm. And of course, they don't have control of the others farms where the cattle is grown. All the results are at our website. What's good from one side is that the best companies, some of the best companies, are commemorating the results on their website, and we expect that this may cause some competition among them to improve. And we expect this rank to be used by everyone, not only consumers but investors as well. We have been talking to investors, like, guys, if you are buying paper for a company who is not controlling its supply chain, you are buying danger. You may lost the value of your asset. So you could establish a policy to prioritize the best ones or avoid the ones you don't have to be involved with. So it could be used by financial companies to drive change as well. And that's it. I have more information you'd like to.
Thank you so very much, Alexandre. I'm going to pass it on now to Nusha. Nusha, Changing Markets Foundation has done a lot of research into the tactics of big meat and dairy to keep the status quo. Can you tell us a little bit more about these tactics and how they enable this industry to fly under the radar of climate regulation? The floor is yours. Is it working? Yeah.
Does it work? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, thank you so much. We've been now analyzing the tactics of big meat and dairy for already a few years, and we published a really big report called The New Merchants of Doubt, where we looked at the 22 of the biggest meat and dairy companies, their industry associations and any lobby groups that they're part of, and what they're doing when it comes to climate and wider environmental regulations. And if you want to use 2 words for what they managed to achieve, they managed to convince policymakers of agricultural exceptionalism. So that means that either when it comes to their oversized methane footprint or wider climate regulation of agriculture, they are able to avoid most of the measures. And this is really critical for our climate fight, because we cannot stay even close to 1.5 degree emission trajectory or meet our biodiversity goals without reforming the food system. And the recent Eat Lancet report also showed there's a major opportunity. We could cut emissions by 15% and prevent 15 million premature deaths. So I want to kind of highlight some of the tactics. We put them into 3 categories: distract, delay, and derail. And probably I don't have time to talk about all of them, but just to give you an idea, distract, a really big one that we discovered, is greenwashing, which means either claims on the packaging as well as other marketing efforts to present products as climate neutral, natural, and also essential or part of the healthy diet. And from that platform, then the industry is also directly attacking alternative protein, which are dubbed as ultra-processed, unhealthy options. They use advertising and misinformation campaigns, and they're also using some of the same PR and advertising agencies that big oil was using in order to delay climate action. We've also found that they fund their own scientists, and they fund science that kind of benefits their agenda, whether it's undermining the impact that methane has, through changing the metrics, the GWP star, or the push for regenerative agriculture. Then we discovered delay tactics, and delay tactics very often focus around techno fixes or voluntary net zero targets. And when you kind of look at what they're actually doing, because if you talk that feed additives are a great solution, then I actually want to see how much you're investing into them. And we see that these companies spent, we mostly could not find the information, but when we could, we found that less than 1% of their revenue is actually spent on research and development, and many of the companies spend more money on advertising. Alternative protein is an interesting one that Glenn mentioned is a really good solution, and we could not find any evidence that any transition is being made as part of their climate targets. When we look at the climate targets, only 15 companies had some weak voluntary commitments, but they largely failed when we kind of looked at them on the integrity test. And then is the last tactic, which is called derail, or like a group of tactics. And here we look at the millions of dollars that are spent on political donations, direct or indirect lobbying, either through industry associations. And this is all to set the agenda and ensure that they have influence over policies. We found examples of conflict of interest when elected politicians benefit from agricultural subsidies that they were supposed to reform. We found examples of revolving doors where key policy experts come from the industry and then return there after the end of their mandate. And we also saw how crises are being used, for example, COVID pandemics or the war in Ukraine, to delay and derail environmental rules. Finally, the one that we've seen that is very, very effective is the way the industry uses farmers' protests. And often these protests start for legitimate reasons, but then big ag is using them to get high-level meetings with politicians and to push their agenda. And their agenda is, again, very often delaying and completely getting rid of environmental rules. A great example of that is Green Deal, which was part of the Green Deal in Europe was farm-to-fork strategy, which promised a green and healthier agriculture system, reducing chemical pesticides and fertilizers, and also recognizing that we needed to shift to more plant-based diet with less red and processed meat. And this package of policies, there was 11 policies that we looked at, and actually almost all of them have been dropped or significantly weakened due to these lobbying efforts. And this also has repercussions for the future of climate policy, because the powerful farm lobby group in EU, Copa-Cogeca, managed to remove an obligation to reduce agriculture emissions by 30% from the 2040 European climate target. So this is kind of a little bit of insights into those tactics. We also have this report looking specifically at how these tactics play out in Brazil. So if you want it, we can give you a copy afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Nusha. Now we are gonna hear from Jorge. Jorge, é prazer te ter aqui. And I would like to know if Mari could translate. In your work and your life experience, you experience impact of these atrocities. Can you share with us more about how this plays out and what you see on the ground, considering meat industry and the impacts on your life? Yeah. Thank you.
Primeiramente, muito obrigado pelo convite. Eu me chamo Jorge Tembé, como já foi colocado. Eu sou...
First of all, thank you very much for being here and for the invitation. I'm called Jorge Tembé.
E eu sou oriundo de Tomé-Açu, no interior daqui do estado do Pará.
I come from Tomé-Açu, from the inner part of the state of Pará.
E estou assessorando, eu sou advogado e sou assessor da Federação Paraense dos Povos Indígenas.
I'm a lawyer and I'm advisor for the Federation of Indigenous People in the state of Pará.
E nessas atividades, representando a FEPIPA, nós temos vários casos aqui no estado do Pará de problemas envolvendo a indústria da carne e a grilagem.
In the activities I do with FEPIPA, I can see a lot of cases of deforestation and land invasions involving the meat industry.
E a grilagem aqui... E essas invasões, elas deixam de considerar algumas condicionantes dos povos que são ligados à sua cultura e também envolvem violações de direitos fundamentais dessas comunidades.
These invasions impact on the culture of these people and also violate indigenous rights.
Aqui no Brasil existe uma fala, né, que é muita terra para pouco indígena.
In Brazil, we are used to listen to the sentence that says that there is a lot of land to a few indigenous people.
Só que essa fala contrasta com o fato de, por exemplo, nós termos mais cabeças de gado do que até mesmo a nossa quantidade total populacional do Brasil.
But this sentence goes against the fact that we have in Brazil today more heads of cattle than people.
Os maiores protetores da Amazônia e da natureza são as comunidades tradicionais e são os povos indígenas.
The strongest protectors of Amazon are indigenous and traditional communities.
Porém, nós temos casos como este que vou citar como exemplo, que é do povo Sarawa, do interior daqui do estado do Pará.
But we have a case that I'm going to mention that is from people Sarawa in the state of Pará.
Que foram afastados de forma forçada do seu território desde o início dos anos 2000 e permanecem assim até hoje.
They were forced to leave their lands since the beginning of the year 2000 and they are still away from there.
E desse caso nós já temos reconhecimento pelo Estado brasileiro desse território indígena, porém madeireiros e grileiros vinculados à indústria da carne impedem de forma violenta esse retorno desse povo ao seu território.
Even if we have the territory recognized by the Brazilian state, timber industry and the cattle industry are keeping people away from their lands.
Já temos decisões judiciais aqui determinando que o Estado brasileiro invista nessa devolutiva desse povo para o seu território.
We have official decisions from the Brazilian government that tells that these people should come back to their lands.
Porém, devido à violência, o Estado não tem cumprido essas decisões judiciais.
But due to the violence, due to violence, the state cannot meet these judicial decisions.
A nossa incidência enquanto federação tem sido para ajudar os povos aqui do Pará a alcançar os seus direitos e diminuir situações como essa.
FEPIPA has worked to try to help these people to come back to their lands and reduce injustices and violences like this one.
E diante desses descumprimentos pelo próprio Estado brasileiro, algumas das medidas que têm sido adotadas são incidências no âmbito internacional com alguns parceiros.
Ahead of the incapacity of Brazilian state to meet these or to respect these judicial decisions, our strategy, FEPIPA's strategy, is to partner with international organizations.
E aí vou para outro exemplo, que é o caso da empresa Cassenu, na França, que nós estamos fazendo incidência juntos, né, para buscar essa condenação e fazer imperar a legislação do dever de vigilância.
One example in this sense is the partnership with us in the casino case. It's a legal case that is in court in France, just to explain. And one of the beneficiaries is FEPIPA, together with COIAB and FEPOINT. And we took to the court, the French court, the casino, which is the biggest supermarket in France, and the second or the third one, the biggest one in Brazil. They owned the Grupo Pão de Açúcar, just for you to have an idea. And we are there fighting for indigenous people's rights in this legal instance. How we are in terms of time? Eu expliquei só pouquinho mais o que era o caso casino. 45 minutes. No, for we still have time? No, can he speak?
So. Yeah, it's working now. Thank you. Thank you so much, George. I think we are running a little bit out of time, but I will pass it on over to you again, just to thank Glenn for being here. And he needs to leave to catch a flight, otherwise he will be stuck in Belém for many time. And thank you, Glenn. You're free to go. Do you want to say something? Or sorry about that.
No, thank you all. And yeah, I think it's a great panel. And João Gonçalves, who's our protein transition director and Brazil director, is going to take over. So,
thank you, Glenn. Yeah, welcome, João from IT Earth. We can continue now, Jorge. Please do share a little bit more about your experience. 2 more minutes, it's fine. Okay.
O que nós sentimos lá na base é que existe uma cadeia de violações que sempre beneficiam os grandes empreendimentos.
What we felt on the ground is a series of violations that always benefit the big meat.
O primeiro é o praticado de 500 anos para cá.
The first one was the first one started 500 years ago.
Que é a exploração da madeira, né?
Which is timber exploitation.
Depois de explorar a madeira, você coloca o gado.
After exploiting timber, you put on cattle inside.
E após isso, vence o discurso da economia verde vendendo a questão do crédito de carbono. Então, o que as comunidades na base sempre sentem é que os seus direitos fundamentais eles sempre são deixados de lado em prol do grande capital.
And then we heard the discourse related to carbon markets, and what communities on the ground feel all the time is that their rights are disrespected and violated.
É um ciclo. E aí, com isso, vários elementos da nossa cultura eles vão sendo perdidos, como língua, como memória, como práticas e como...
It's a cycle, and with this, a lot of elements from our culture, our language, and our memory are lost.
Eu não sei se todos vocês sabem, mas os povos indígenas aqui no Brasil têm muitos elementos da natureza que são vinculados à sua identidade e à sua territorialidade e aquilo que é intrínseco do seu próprio ser.
I don't know if you know, but indigenous people have a lot of elements from their culture that are linked to nature, to the land, and they are intrinsic to their beings.
E muitos desses elementos têm sido perdidos, como por exemplo, e aí deixo um último exemplo, lá na minha cidade em Tomé Açu.
And a lot of these elements has been lost. I will leave you with a last example from my community in Tomé Açu.
Em razão dessas iniciativas, tanto da indústria da carne quanto da monocultura.
Due to the initiatives from the big meat and also monoculture,
Nós tivemos assoreamento, para quem é de fora, assoreamento de igarapés, mas para dentro da cultura também, por exemplo, aquilo foi um assassinato de alguém do rio, que era parte daquilo que nós somos.
the impact on rivers, for some people is just an impact on rivers, but for us is the death of a river, of a close friend to us.
Thank you so very much, Jorge. It's always amazing to have this opportunity to listen from field experience, and as we have like not simultaneously translation, I allowed myself to give you extra time for sharing your experience. Thank you so much, and thank you for all your strength and fight and your cause. And I hope you find that you have partners here with you. And moving on to the next round of questions, I'm going to place one for all. But before that, I would like to add a little bit to what Georgie brought, a little bit of data. In October 2023, the Federal Prosecution Office published a report called Boi Pirata, in which it identified 86 cattle farms that had invaded the Apitereua indigenous land. 86 farms that invaded. This is located here in Pará State, where we are. And the problem is far from being resolved, not only because they found over 14,000 cows being raised on these farms, but also because we continue to find financial flows going to the region. At CCCA, my colleague, Deborah Nogaroli, who unfortunately could not be here, she analyzed that between 2019 and 2024, the amount of rural credits that banks give to the farmers for the Apitereua pressure zone, which means like farms that are located up to 20 kilometers from the indigenous land border, this credit increased more than 630%. And we analyzed until last year. So it's a very recent data. And we see that there are continuous financial flows going to that region. And this shows the gap that exists between the meat industry promises, state promises as well, and the reality on climate action. So my second question to all of you would be to give examples of how do you see these gaps also taking place between promises and real action. May I start with you, João? Yeah, I can give you the microphone. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you, Raissa. Thanks for coordinating, mediating this debate for us. What I think it's very important to highlight, you brought the data, Jordi brought the reality, and what we see from the companies, what we see from the big meat industry. Today we have at least like 3 different commitments. The first one is the DCF commitments, the deforestation and conversion-free commitments of each company. The second one is the roadmap that meat companies, including meat packers and soy traders, created in the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. And of course, like the Brazilian government has also a commitment to achieve the zero deforestation by 2030. And my question is how we are going to achieve that. Many of the DCF commitments of the companies, they are about to they are about to start. The deadline actually is in the end of 2025, and we see we are still have a lot of deforestation linked with soy and cattle. In the case of soy, it's even worse because like the Amazon soy moratorium, that's a huge mechanism that's really help to decrease the soil-linked deforestation in the Amazon. It's about to go, you know. The Amazon soy moratorium is facing really great attacks, not great attacks, but really strong attacks and threats from the sector, from the government, state governments. So how the companies and how we as a society wants to achieve the zero deforestation for 2030. And we have actually for example JBS, they already said that was not a promise, that was an aspiration. So what's the gray area between promises, reality, and our aspirations? What we can expect?
Thank you. Very good question, João. Thank you so much. Now, same question for Alexandre. What are the other gaps that you see, Alexandre, between promises and real action?
Well, when a sector wants to really improve, it needs data. It needs to know where they are and how they are going. So the first step is to follow the steps that they are taking. We produce each year that rank that we have shown to you, and up to now we don't see companies paying attention to it and following the results and answering to it in a way that would be in accordance to a commitment to improve. That's why we still have, even the best companies, they still don't have any control of the indirect farms. If you would expect to reach full control by the end of next year, the full picture should be different by now.
Yeah, so from my perspective, it would be what we're seeing increasingly is the meat industry trying to position itself as part of the climate solutions. But instead of taking real action, they're doing this through changing the narrative. So we can see how the industry is now sponsoring the media center. We can see AgriZone, where, for example, we have a lot of focus on solutions, but then when you look at what they're actually doing, we see JBS has been fined $1.5 million. They settled, right, for greenwashing. And they're still allowed to sponsor the media center here, and this is not really taken up by the media. And then the other thing we see is methane, right? Methane is a really kind of Achilles heel of the industry. And while dairy industry has been taking some action, they have targets, they have reporting, they're becoming more transparent, the meat industry is just trying to change the metrics. So they are working with the scientists to shift to GWP star or no additional warming, which would then mean, in the case of Brazil, that instead of cutting emissions, you would be able to keep more or less the same level and then claim that you're still somehow contributing to reductions of methane because it's a short-lived gas. We also see how they're influencing policies. So Brazil has an ambitious NDC plan, but actually agriculture is excluded from most of the policies that would get them there. Methane, 75% of Brazil methane comes from agriculture, but that is actually not at all included or mentioned in the NDC. And because the industry is so close to setting the agenda, they're actually also managed to exclude those discussions from how are we going to meet the global methane pledge. Governments have committed to 30% cuts, and we're 5 years to go. So we really need the industry to step up the game and actually start investing into those solutions. If you go to AgriZone and Brapa, the only mention of methane we have seen is about trying to figure out which cows have less methane and breed them amongst each other. And this is kind of the industry's proposal. And unfortunately, this does not go far enough.
Thank you, Nasha. I pulled a quote from you. I find it very impactful that companies are changing the narrative instead of changing their production practices. I think this says a lot. And I would like to hear now from Jorge, if you could add more to this challenge. What are the other gaps that you see between action and promises?
Eu gostaria de começar esse apontamento destacando aqui das pessoas que estão se abanando e sentindo o calor daqui, né? Eu acho que não existe maior exemplo do que você ver na mídia toda essa narrativa, mas sentir aqui o que é a realidade, você estar no coração da Amazônia sentindo todo esse impacto.
He said he would like to start his appointments by looking at the people who are doing like this, because it's not possible to read something good about big meat in the media and feel the heat in here in Belém and during the COP.
Depois de todos esses 500 anos de luta, eu acredito que os povos indígenas deixaram muito bem claro ontem que podem parar a COP para mostrar a realidade.
After 500 years of fight, indigenous people could show yesterday that they are able to stop COP and show the world the reality they are living.
Então, não importa se as grandes empresas elas vão comprar as mídias, mas nós vamos mostrar nessa COP para o mundo o que realmente está acontecendo aqui.
So no matter if the big industry, meat industry is buying newspapers and the media in general, indigenous people are there to show the world what is really happening.
E para finalizar, infelizmente, nós identificamos que por algumas omissões o próprio Estado brasileiro acaba sendo omisso nesse sentido também. É com que eu finalizo.
And unfortunately, we have seen that the Brazilian government is also omiss in this scenario, and this is how he wants to end.
Thank you so very much. Very thoughtful, very impactful contribution. And now I would like to open to questions if someone in the audience. Oh, we've got an. Yeah. I think, can you come over here? Would that be okay? I think I can bring that over to you. Let's see if it.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting panel. Oh yeah, my name is Sajeev. I'm from the FAIR Initiative. We work a lot. We do some of the benchmarking stuff that you are doing also, and we engage with corporates and investors to like transition the agri-food system. I think something that always makes me wonder is that, I mean, you guys are here, and I'm sure you have a North Star, right? I mean, you want to get somewhere. The question I have is that, is the strategy and approach that you're using at the moment, is that going to get you there? Or do you need to like change the way you are working or the way you're communicating as well to bring more corporates into the mold, to have a constructive conversation with them? Because otherwise, we're creating these gridlocks where there's no, you're just talking against each other. And sometimes I feel that, like, so is that something that you're considering, or, is that, you still have to like push hard from your side?
Thank you. Is that a question to everyone from the? Okay. Does anyone like to start?
We were just talking about this before the panel, right? And what we were saying, and you can talk about Brazilian example, right? But like, without challenging companies, people don't know what is out there and what is happening and how they perform. So things like rankings that you do, we also do rankings on methane emissions, both on retailers with Mighty Earth and then also on dairy and coffee brands. We just launched a new methane action tracker that people can check. Meat industry is not there yet because they're not doing any action, but hopefully soon this will change. But yeah, this is kind of how you create some kind of pressure. And then the other pressure that we need to create, I think it's really like what we were discussing is philanthropy, right? Philanthropy needs to be a bit more courageous and fund this kind of efforts, and then also the media, because recently there was a study showing that only 4% of all the climate stories from 11 major newspapers actually report animal agriculture as part of the climate emissions problem. And this is really why people don't know, because when people ask, what can you do, you know, okay, maybe what can you do or what can be done to save, you know, to help the climate, everyone says recycling, and dietary shift is actually really low there. So yeah, and then, you know, when you have this thing that you create the pressure, then actually the industry acts, or they find this money for investments, and yeah, you start to see action. This is what we see in the dairy sector and methane. Like we haven't seen that a few years ago, and I'm pretty sure that if there wasn't pressure, they would not have been acting on methane. But yeah, your perspective.
Sure, this is an excellent question that we ask ourselves each day. If you are communicating well, if you are based on the right message. We are changing all time, and one of our efforts, for instance, is to show that meat without deforestation is not going to be more expensive. Actually, it could be cheaper, because the best producers, the farmers who have best control and don't have deforestation on their production, they are more productive, and they produce with less costs, low cost than the other ones. So we can produce meat cheaper without deforestation. And the other good message that we should be spreading more is that we can produce meat enough to meet all the demand. We don't need to avoid eating. We don't need to reduce production. We don't need to reduce exportation. On the contrary, we can produce more and better without deforestation. And the third message that we should convey is that the consumer has the power. The Brazilian consumers love to eat meat. And if they think that they would feel guilty if they eat meat, they will stop and deny everything, because denial is the easiest path to go forward. But they don't need to. They can eat, they can buy meat. They only have to pay more attention, to learn more, to choose well.
Yes, we are always changing the narrative. We are companies, organizations, in a living world, very crazy world, let's say like that. But something that's really important, it's key of our strategy with the companies, is to ask for transparency. Transparency for consumers to know the origin of their products, transparency for financiers to know where how the company is achieving their sustainable goals that they are investing. And that's a good point. Why? Because transparency, a big company that's listed in a huge stock exchange in New York, in São Paulo, in Amsterdam, cannot say that they don't like transparency. You know, consumers and people, we don't eat this speech anymore. You know, so that's one aspect that's very important.
Yeah, Georgie. Georgie, you will close the panel, so yeah, we rely on you to be more optimistic.
O meu é pouco pessimista, mas...
He's a bit pessimist, unfortunately.
Mas falando sobre a pergunta que ele fez, eu acho que o diálogo com as empresas ele já tem sido construído com os levantamentos de dados, que foi bem ilustrado aqui.
He said that the dialogue with companies has been built through the share of the data that has been shown here.
E eu acho que o que falta, na verdade, é um endurecimento no ponto de cumprimento mesmo das obrigações.
And what is really missing is to get tougher in the demand for fulfilling the engagements, meeting their engagements.
Porque, como foi colocado aqui pelo Alexandre, os dados eles acabam servindo para aumentar a competitividade, mas eu entendo que não é a competitividade que deve nortear isso. Se eles não estão tendo compromisso com aquilo que eles assumem para si, há uma necessidade desse endurecimento. Na verdade, é aí que ressalta-se essa necessidade de endurecimento.
We must put more pressure because it's not competitiveness that should lead their actions, but their true engagements.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all, Jorge, Nusha, Alexandre, João, and Glenn, who were here before. I wish we could have more time to discuss, but time is up. And I would like to just highlight that what people said here is that there are tools available for improving traceability, and the companies have all what they need in hands to implement change, and they should focus on that instead of changing narratives. Thank you so much for being here again, and this panel is closing. And I invite you all to continue the conversation outside. Thank you.